Craig, in a growing number of articles, you have warned about the digital revolution and especially AI. What are some of your concerns?
Well, there doesn't seem to be any security in a digital world. Cybersecurity, there are a lot of firms, you pay them a lot of money, but they will admit that they can't make you secure. They can only make it more difficult for you to be scammed or have malware planted on you or whatever, essentially by training you and your employees how to be hyper careful. So what the digital revolution, it's not just destroyed all of our privacy and made it possible for governments to spy on us without warrants, thus violating our constitutional rights in the United States. Other countries may not be protected by a constitution. But it's also made us financially insecure because our credit cards can be stolen and used. Our bank accounts can be drained. Our investment accounts can be drained. People can steal our identity and load us up with mountains of debt. It's just a totally insecure system. The old analog system had none of these vulnerabilities. So how did we benefit from moving into the digital age? It appears only through this kind of transmission that you and I are currently engaged in. You're in Europe, I'm in the US. We're conducting a visual interview live. That's one way. The only other way I can think of is it allows people to work at home instead of going to an office. So, but look at the cost. Total insecurity, a complete total breakdown in any customer relationships. So if you try to contact any kind of service provider, it is an ordeal. What used to take a few minutes on the telephone, answered on the third ring, now can take hours, days even.
Is that basically any service you try to call?
Yes.
Then you're speaking to a robot?
Yes. Any service, you get a robot voice, and this robot is programmed, but he's never programmed to answer the questions you have or to deal with your problem. And yet the robot resists connecting you to a real live person who can think and take some kind of action. It's often the case that when you do reach a real live person, the person hasn't the authority to deal with the problem and has to kick you upstairs. That can take more hours, even more days. And then you're dependent on getting a call back. It's impossible these days to live life without a cell phone, but cell phones are unreliable too. And now we learn that the scammers are using AI. They can impersonate your husband's voice, your wife's voice, sons, daughters, parents, best friend, investment advisor. They can completely reproduce what appear to be official pages, official letterheads, official everything. And so everything you get, you can't trust. You have to first investigate. For example, I just received this morning an email from Harvard University Press telling me there was a royalty for me, but they didn't have my Social Security number, my tax ID. They included a form I'm supposed to put it on and send back. Well, I said, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense because my book published by Harvard was in 1984. It stayed in print for many, many years. But I was told some years ago, right after they sold republication rights to China, where it was translated and published in Chinese, that the book was now out of print. So here I am getting a request for a tax ID. Somehow they've got my email, but they don't have my tax ID. Well, they had my tax ID before there was email, because in 1984, I don't think there was email. So this morning, I have to first research Harvard University Press. Well, it's the same address as is on the email. So I be sure I have the Harvard official site. I call a number. I hit the button for royalties. And lo and behold, I get the voicemail of the person who sent the email. I left a message. So I'll see what happens when I get a call back, what this is really all about. I got a message the other day from Malwarebytes. And now it says that you know how when you go online somewhere and they want to protect themselves and you have to say you're not a robot and you have to reproduce some collection of letters or numbers. They're called CAPTCHA. Well, now they have a way of hijacking all of these. So one appears, and it may be legitimate, but it's hijacked. And whatever you put in there, they direct you to what you think is the site. It's not. They get all your information, and then there goes your bank account or whatever.
That's a very common technique. On a weekly basis, I receive emails purporting to claim that some of my domain names for some of my website have expired, and I rapidly have to go on a particular website and extend it. These are all fake because I know when they in fact do expire. But if you click on the link, you'll probably be guided to a site that is an exact replica of the site where I actually have my domains and websites stored. That's a clever technique that scammers can use. And then they probably want me to enter my PayPal address or my banking account or what have you. And then they will have me.
That's right. That's exactly the case. And or you'll get a notice that your credit card payment didn't go through. That it could be a legitimate payment, because a lot of people now they pay all their accounts automatically. They either charge it to their bank or they charge it to a credit card. And so you get one and it says your payment to the power company didn't go through. I've got here the magazine from AARP. That is the American Association of Retired People. And the issuer is dealing with internet fraud. How to stay safe against the latest scams. Well, the scams are multiplying and becoming more and more sophisticated more rapidly than they can keep up with them. So, and even Malwarebytes has said there are scams out there and there are ways to be infected that we haven't caught on to yet. So even your virus protection gets outrun by the scammers, and the new way to attack you has to appear and cause havoc until Malwarebytes, which is one of the protecting services, can get a hold of it and find out how to protect. So when you think about it, it's gotten to be so clever and so pervasive that you really can't afford to respond to anything or even answer your cell phone. And I know increasingly people simply do not answer the cell phone.
I know quite a few people who won't answer the cell phone unless they recognize the number because they assume it's some kind of scam because they're taking place all the time, especially if people, if they don't use a burner, if their number is registered on some site like the White Pages in the US, for example. So scammers, they can simply just use a code to fetch all the phone numbers.
I know people who won't answer the phone even if they recognize the number because they think the number's been hijacked. And so they rely on text. They will only text. They'll respond to a text. Now you can still call like a local company, and generally a person will answer. But other than that, the phones they're not useful. Nothing like phones were useful in the analog days. They were highly useful. You couldn't necessarily carry them around in your pocket and scroll them all day long, amusing yourself. But if you had to use them for the purpose for which they're invented, you could, and you could trust it. And if the government wanted to spy on your telephone conversation, they had to get a warrant from a judge. Someone had to climb up a telephone post and put a tap on the line. And so it wasn't something that they could indiscriminately do. There was no way they could tap everybody's line. They'd have to climb up endless numbers of telephone posts. They'd have to have endless numbers of people to do it. And so we had privacy. Well, privacy is protected in the Constitution, but it doesn't exist. So the truth of the matter is, in the United States, the digital revolution is unconstitutional. Under the American Constitution, the digital revolution should not be permitted to exist. But no one makes any of these points. I think the people get so much pleasure out of scrolling the phone all day long that they accept the enormous risk of just having one.
In addition to scammers stealing our money and hijacking our identities, there's another major concern, especially over a long period of time. We can see that increasingly people are using AI search engines to finding answers to all of their problems. For example, my niece, she says that everybody in her class is using ChatGPT. And what are they using it for? They're using it to solve their math problems, their physics problems. So that means that people will increasingly be using technology to solve these rather than actually activating those centers of the brain that are normally responsible for problem solving. So in the future, people might not be able to solve problems any longer, physics, math, and other important things. I had an experience myself recently where I hired a biologist to check some work for me for my book. And then weeks later, she delivered a report, and I instantly recognized that this was AI generated, which she subsequently admitted. And I was, of course, extremely angry, and I got the money back. But that made me curious. So I found her PhD dissertation online, and then I used a program to scan it, and I found out that a significant part of her thesis was, in fact, created by AI. Unbelievable.
When students use AI to do their work, like to write their themes, they never learn how to write one. They never learn how to present ideas or solve a problem themselves. This has been going on for some time. A software friend of mine told me recently that the firm he's in told all the software engineers that they would be replaced by AI in 3 years because they only need a few engineers to give the task to AI. AI has no capability of giving itself a task. It has to be programmed. Its power is the ability to read patterns and rapidly go through entire databases and the speed of computation. And so it always has to be programmed and given an assignment. It doesn't assign itself. It's not going to become sentient. It's not going to develop consciousness and take over, but it is a very powerful tool for doing things that can be programmed. So it's not only software. An architect friend of mine, a very distinguished architect, he told me for some years now, the architects no longer design the building. They give parameters to a software program, and that program designs the building. I had a cab driver some years ago in New York. He was an engineering student, and he worked as a cab driver, paying his way through. And I was talking to him because I'd gone to Georgia Tech, an engineering school. And he said, well, they still teach us calculus and advanced math and all that, but we never use it. We have software programs. So they learn, in those days, they learned the math, even though they had never an occasion to use it, because they had software programs for all of their engineering work. Well, now I think they'll just simply stop teaching the math because you don't need it. I have a relative with 4 degrees, including a PhD. He does not know the multiplication tables because when he was going through school, they had computers and there was no reason to memorize the multiplication tables. You just plugged in the numbers and you got it right there. I have other relatives who cannot write their name. They can't do longhand because they never had a course in cursive writing, because they always typed on a keyboard. To come back to your point, which is very valid, there really isn't any more education, because if AI is writing your theme, you don't learn anything. What do you know? You don't even know the subject matter. You don't have to know. You don't have to know history to write a theme. The AI searches the database, writes it for you, but you pass the course, but you know nothing about the content in history because there's no reason to ever have learned it. And this is, I think, going to be increasingly true. So what your point is that AI is destroying the education of the human race. So what happens when the last educated person dies? What happens when there's nobody capable of programming AI, of giving it a task? So, this is not a problem societies have faced up to or confronted. If you produce generations of people who know nothing because they don't need to know anything because AI does the work, so they never learn the subject, well, then you've got people who can't use AI because they can't program it and give it a task, and who have no historical awareness. They don't know where their position is in space or time or history or culture or anything. So I think it's safe to say that AI, or more broadly, the digital revolution, is the worst thing, except for nuclear weapons, perhaps, that mankind has ever come up with. In my view, all of these people who think they're so smart because they did the digital revolution and AI, they're completely stupid people. And I mean it. They may be high IQ, but they're stupid in the inability to see consequences. And all of these consequences, which we've been talking about, some of them, I mean, we could go on for days talking about it. These consequences are ignored. They're not part of the discussion. Instead, we have these fantasies about how AI is going to take over. But it's not sentient. It can't take over.
Just imagine the impact of a world with driverless cars. All the bus drivers, the taxi drivers, the Uber drivers, they're all out of business. AI will take over.
Well, that's another consequence of it. What are humans going to do if AI can reproduce the work most people do? I mean, if you don't need software engineers, so you only need a few to give the AI a task, If you don't need architects, you don't need engineers, maybe a few to give the tasks. Even the high grade professions, there's no work. So for everybody else, now look, we've already lost customer service representatives. They're gone. All back office operations, it's all gone. Receptionists are gone. No, your human person never answers the phone except in a small local business. So, and Elon Musk addressed this recently. He said, well, since there be no work, he said the main achievement of the digital revolution is to bring in communism. He said everyone will have to be given an income. And the income, or otherwise, how can they purchase the goods and services produced by AI? And the incomes will not need to be given on the basis of merit because there's no merit performance. It'll be equal. So we'll finally have communist equality. Everybody gets an equal income to go out and purchase the goods and services made by robots and AI. And he said that so what the digital revolution does, it brings communism. And I think that's the case. And still, it remains, what do the people do all day? They've got money for nothing. What do? They sit in front of screens. What else do they do? In America, 75% of the people are obese. So they're not going to be playing sports. The IQ levels, that hardly anybody has 120 or 130 IQ. That's way out, on the very low end, it's the top end, but a very tiny percentage of the population has those kinds of IQs. So people become irrelevant. They're basically irrelevant. And so you can see now why the World Economic Forum wants to get rid of everybody. There's no need for people any longer. They haven't any role. AI has taken the role. Only a few people have a role. The ones that somehow are selected and who are smart enough to give AI the purpose, keep it on track, program it, reprogram it, whatever. But this is a tiny percentage of the human population, so there's nothing for anybody else to do but try to amuse themselves. Maybe they'll have holograms. They'll have hologram games, and they can live in artificial reality all day long. This, in other words, you're no longer human. You've got no challenges. You've got no avenues for creativity. No ability because you're not educated. You don't know anything. You don't need to know anything because you push a button and AI tells you. There's no research libraries because you don't need them because AI can run through all the data instantaneously in billionths of a second. And so humans are irrelevant. And that's the consequence of the digital revolution. And this is why I say people who came up with this are completely stupid. They're completely stupid. They have made people superfluous. So I think that about sums it up.